talking from my office. Okay, so you hear me well? I'm not sure my internet is good or not. Can you hear me?
Like,
Okay, thank you. So now I think they got 26 students. Probably we could start the lectures anyway. So any questions from the previous lectures? Any questions? So if no question, I assume that you already understand the lecture. I think we end up here. Okay, let me check. And so we're looking at the national accounts and the current accounts, their interactions, and intercorrelation between national account and the current account, and we are looking at it. So today we're looking at the macroeconomic policies for policymakers and in an open economy. So we're just talking about an open economy because I think closed economy doesn't apply any to any country anymore. I guess even China. So we're just looking at what open economy do. So in open economy, the policymaker are motivated by what we call two goals. So internal balance, because refer to the country full employment of its resources. No resources is at disposal, and they need to maintain price level stability. So, and the external balance. External balance means the country attain its current account is neither deeply in deficit or not so strongly in surplus. So what does it mean by internal balance? And so internal balance, it means the country is achieving its full employment. It means full employment means it fully employ the country productive resources and price level stabilities. Or so price level stability meaning that inflation is neither deficits, is neither deflation or inflations. And full employment means fully employed productive resources, or we can say low unemployment. Under and over employment lead to price level movement that reduce economy efficiency. So that's why they want to maintain the full employment. And if you ask me why how can we know the productive resources are fully employed? So the answer is we're just looking at the unemployment. And the price level stability, we're looking at the inflations. And the unemployment, we cannot say how much is good, how much is not good. It depends on the countries again. So underemployment or overemployment both lead to price, both have an impact on the price level that it may reduce economy efficiencies. And you already learn in macro or in other courses related to monetary policies. Inflation and deflation can occur both under full employment. And of course, inflation bring you some issues or some disadvantages, but deflation also bring you disadvantages as well. That's why the government, they try to avoid price level instabilities. And how they do that? So the government must prevent any substantial movement in the aggregate demand relative to its full employment level. And they need to ensure that the domestic money supply does not grow too quickly or too slowly. So if you go back to macroeconomic theories, we're looking at the real demand of money and then the the supply of money. So you can see that when the central bank, they supply too much money in the economies, the currency or the money in the country will lose its values. And then it may cause the inflation to increase. So one example is Zimbabwe. You can see Zimbabwe have a issue in really hyperinflation. I could say like that. About external balance. So external balance is the optimal level of current account, and we unemployment and inflation, we could say this is the optimal balance that we want. But notion of external balance is more difficult because it's difficult to define optimal level of current account than the internal balance, like the inflations or the unemployment. So external balance has no full employment or stable price to apply to an economy external transactions. So the economy traits can cause macroeconomic problems depend on several factors. So trade can be affected from economy, particular circumstances. Sorry. Okay. And the second one is the condition outside world, or we can say external factors. So the trade can be affected by internal factor, economy circumstances, domestic economy, or the world economies. And the third one is the institutional arrangement governing its economic relation with foreign countries. So beside domestic economy, beside the world economy, the international relation with the foreign country is also important. That impact the trade. And we already see the real example like China and the US. So the relation between US and China, you already know, it's not so good. That's why both of the countries keep competing, keep debating on, and keep attacking each other, and they start to have trade protectionism, trade barrier increasing, the tariff, for example. So it depends. It can impact economy, trade, and then it also impact the external balance as well. So we say, in order to maintain external balance, we want to attain neither not too deeply current account deficit or so strongly current account surpluses. So what are the problems with excessive current account deficits? So excessive current account deficit, sometimes they represent a high consumption resulting from misguided government policies. So current account deficit meaning the government doesn't have a good financial management systems. They don't have a good budget, for example. They have higher expenditure than their incomes, or they may represent that their tax collection system is not efficient. So it represents a lot of fallings in government policies. And current account deficit can undermine foreign investor confidence and contribute to a lending crisis as well. So current account deficit can draw back, can undermine the foreign confidence in providing you the loan, because You have current account deficit means you already owing to others. So they are reluctant to give you more money to lend. So that can undermine the investor confidence if you have excessive current account deficits. How about surplus? Actually, surplus also provide you some problem as well. So current account too much or too excessive current account surplus meaning that the domestic economy encounter lower investments because current account surplus meaning you have capital outflow to other country, you lend your money to other country, to foreigner, to abroad. So it means that there are less investment, there lower investment in the domestic economies, which can lead to inefficient investments or not enough investment to create more job for the domestic residents. And then they can create potential problem for creditor to collect their money. So when you have too much excessive current account surplus, it means you lend money to the other countries. So sometimes the for yourself, it's hard. Sometimes when the country have some problem, you are not able to collect their money. So it's one of the potential problem as well. And then the third one, it may be inconvenient for political reasons. So when you have excessive current account surplus, other country may starting putting the barrier on your imports. So the real example is China again, China and the US. So US have current account deficit and China has current account surpluses. So it made the US start to raise the tariff for China's. Then after the US raising the tariff for China's, China now start to revaluation their currency because they don't want to have excessive current account surpluses in this case. And several factors might lead to policymakers to prefer that domestic saving actually devote to higher level of domestic investment and lower level of foreign investment. So as a policymaker, we want to have a higher domestic saving that contribute to higher level of investment in the country because we believe that if they invest domestically, the policymaker or the government, they're easier to tax them. When they bring the money to invest in the other country, it's hard to it's hard to keep track and tax those money, those investments. And the second one is that it may reduce domestic unemployment. If they have higher domestic saving that contribute to higher level of domestic investment, it create more jobs. It can reduce unemployment in the countries. And then it also can beneficial for technological spillover effect as well. When you devote or most of the domestic saving locally or for domestic investments. That's the macroeconomic policy, the main policy goal in an open economies. And then beside the main goal, we also have others sub policy goal as well that we are not going to mention in much detail in these presentations. So we're looking at the policies. So now for us, it's good for us to touch a little bit on the history of international monetary arrangement. And I guess you already familiar or already go into this topic from the previous course as well. So we're just going really fast and a brief one. So it started with the gold standards. So the gold standard it started in 1876 to the World War I, 1913. So the gold has been during the gold standard, the gold has been a medium of exchange, and actually the gold is a medium of exchange since 3000 BC, before centuries. And the rule of game during the gold standard is actually simple. So each country set the rate at which its currency unit could be converted to a weight of gold. So it's really simple. And then during that time, the currency regime, the exchange rate regime is actually fixed to some amount of gold. And then the expansionary monetary policy were actually limited to a government supply of gold. So during the time, because gold is a medium of exchange, so when the government want to have expansionary monetary policy, it's really limited for them because they have to look back how much gold they have in their hands. So it's hard for them to supply many of gold, unlike printing monies. So and then the gold standard in effect until the outbreak of the World War One, when the free movement of gold was interrupted. So the war had interrupts the movement of the circulation of the gold during that times. So this is just the evolution and the era of the global monetary systems. So you can see we start with classical gold standard during this time, and then they have a World War One. So what is the impact on trade? So trade dominated capital flow during the gold standard, and then we have the interwar year between the World War One and the World War Two. During that time, in terms of trade, it increased the barrier to trade and capital flow. And impact on economics during the gold standard is the increased world trade with limited capital flow, and during the interwar year, it start to have protectionism and nationalisms. And then we have the fixed exchange rate after the World War II. So the impact fixed exchange rate on trade is the capital flow began to dominate trade. And then we have a expanded open economy. So now many countries start to open their economy, or we have lower protectionism. And then we move to floating exchange rate, which is impact on trade is the capital flow still dominate the trade. And then the industrial economy increasingly opens. Emerging nation open slowly. So we have industrial economy like the UK, for example, Germany. They increasingly open their capital flow or their capital account of the economies. And then current era, the impact on trade is that selected emerging nations, they start open the capital market as well. And then the capital flow drive economic developments, the flow between countries. So this is just a graph showing what happened in the histories of monetary system. Actually, I should put this one at the end of the section. So then we have interwar year that we see in this graphic in this X earlier. So during this period, currency were allowed to fluctuate over a fairly wide range in terms of gold and each other. And then the fluctuation in currency value become realized as a speculator so short with currencies. So for the US, they adopted a modified gold standard in 1934. And then during the World War II, the chaos started again. Aftermath, the US dollar was the only major trading currency that continued to be convertible during the interwar periods. So then we had the Bretton Woods and the International Monetary Fund, or we say the IMF. So as the World War II almost end, the Allied power they met at the Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to create a post-war international monetary system. And then the meeting at the Bretton Woods agreed to establish a US dollar-based international monetary system and created in two new institutions is the IMF and the World Bank. So the fixed exchange rate period is happened during these times. I mean, time is a fixed exchange rate periods. Oh. So the IMF created and its aim is to create it to have country defend the currency against any cyclical, seasonal, or random occurrence or crisis. And they assist country having structural trade problems if they promise to take adequate steps to correct these problems. And then they have their special drawing rights is the IMF reserve asset, which is currency, which is in currently the weighted average of four currency. Uh, uh, they weighted between the four currencies in this case. So during sort of when the IMF they first created it, actually they just deal with the exchange rate. They just deal with the current account deficits, the current account problems. They are not dealing with other issues. So this is for their first creation. And then we have the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is the World Bank, that had fund post-war reconstruction and has seen then supported general economic development. So for the IMF during that time, they supported the exchange rate. They supported the current account deficit specifically. They supported the management of the reserve, and the World Bank they support generally for economic developments to reconstruction the countries in this case. So now I think uh, currently the SDR we have additional currencies. So before we have four, we have US dollar, euro, Japanese yen, and pound sterling. So now we have additional one is the Chinese yuan, renminbi. So now China, or we can say Yemenizations, become increasingly valuable currency as well. So how about what happened under the Bretton Woods system, or we say the fixed exchange rate system? So to describe a problem that an individual country other than the US face in pursuing internal and external balance under the Bretton Woods system, or we say the fixed exchange rate, we assume that the domestic interest rate equal to the world interest rate. So to maintain the internal balance, if both the foreign price and the exchange rate are permanently fixed, because we can see now in the Bretton Woods system, the exchange rate is fixed. So the internal balance requires only full employment, because we assume that the interest rate, domestic interest rate and the world interest rate is equal. And then we also assume that both foreign price and the exchange rate is fixed. So what the internal balance for policymaker they want to maintain is actually just full employment, or we say lower unemployment rate, just to be easy. So the investment assumed to be constant. So the condition of internal balance for this case under the fixed exchange rate is the output equal to consumption plus investment plus government expenditure and plus the current accounts. So the policy tool that affect aggregate demand. So the Y here we could represent it as the aggregate demand or output. Affect the aggregate demand, therefore affect output in the short run in this case. So this is just a figure showing the zone of the combination of exchange rate and domestic spending mechanisms that the level of exchange rate or the overall domestic spending that which can be implied for employment and current account in this case. So we have a four zone here. So zone one, the country is having overemployment and excessive current account surplus. In Zone 2, the country is experiencing overemployment and excessive current account deficits. In Zone 3, we have countries that experience underemployment and excessive current account deficit. And in Zone 4, country is experiencing underemployment and excessive current account surpluses in this case. So we have the exchange rate on the y-axis and the fiscal ease on the x-axis. So fiscal ease, or we can say expansionary fiscal policies. So expansionary fiscal policy can be done by either you increase the government spending or you lower the tax. So either ways. So for exchange rate, the going up mean appreciations, or I mean going up or increase in exchange rate mean depreciations, and going down mean appreciations in this case. So for examples, so at point 1 it means we have internal and external balance at point 1 here. So if you go to the left, it means you have increased your spending too much, means you overemployment, and then your overemployment meaning that your resource is not you too much using your resource. It can create it can impact your price levels because everyone has money, everyone go for goods and services. It means your inflation's increasing in this case. And when you're spending too much, it might be the case that you have excessive current account deficit. That means you may spending more than you more than your country deserve to do, more than your country needed. So if the country move away from point 1, for example, so they need appropriate adjustment in domestic spendings in this case. And the exchange rate are needed to bring about internal and external balance. So point 1 is actually in, meaning that the country are in internal balance and external balance. So moving away from point 1, either you need adjustment in domestic spending and then the adjustment in the exchange rate as well. So what are the policy tools that the country can have to affect the economy external balance? So assume that the government has a target value X for current account surpluses. So the external balance requires the government to manage fiscal policies and the exchange rate so that the current account multiplied by, the current account in as a function of exchange rate and as a function of output minus tax equal to your target values. So to maintain its current account at X, it needs to devalue the currency. The government must expand or purchase, must increase its government purchase or lower the tax in order to maintain their current account surpluses. So to have appropriate adjustment in domestic spending or exchange rate, we have two policies. So a change in fiscal policy that influence spending so as to move economy back to point 1, we call an expenditure changing policies because it changed the level of economy total demand for goods and service. So if you change your fiscal policies, it means fiscal policies actually directly influence your spending, influence economy spending. So in fluent economy spending, it means it will change the economy total demand for goods and services. So we call the policy expenditure changing policies. And then the accompanying exchange rate adjustment. So we have to change both fiscal policy and the adjustment in the exchange rate. So the adjustment in exchange rate policy to move country into point one, we call the expenditure switching policies because it changed the direction of the demands. So change the direction of the demand can be shifting it between domestic output and imports, for example. So for example, if you devalue your currency, meaning now the exchange rate is increasing. So if you decide to devalue your currency, it means it means you want to increase your exports. So increase your export, it means the the domestics, you just change the direction of the demands between domestic output and imports. So you want to raise export and then you so now the domestic demand, so the direction of the demand is now changing from uh, 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 um, domestic output to imports, for example. And then if you want to devalue your currencies, it means the exchange rate is lower. It means you want to switching your demand from domestic output to imports, because now when your currency is appreciating, it means you are having I mean you can buy more of your imports rather than your uh, rather than higher than your exports, because now your export is more expensive in this case. So we have two policy here. If you change the fiscal policy, we call them expenditure changing policies. If you and the accompanying exchange rate adjustment, we call them expenditure switching policy. So in general, so that's why in point one here show that the policy setting that place economy in the position that policymaker would prefer at point one here. So this is what we want. So we have expenditure changing policies because the change in fiscal policy that move the economy to point one. And because expenditure changing policy because it changed the level of the total demand for goods and services. Expenditure switching policy is just the accompanying adjustment in exchange rate policies. It's switching, it called expenditure switching because we just switch from domestic output to imports. That's why we call it expenditure switching, to spend on domestic output or to spend on imports. So in general, both expenditure changing and expenditure switching are needed to reach internal and external balance. So apart from monetary policies, fiscal policy is the main policy that pushing total domestic expenditure up or down. So usually the monetary policy have indirect impact on the domestic demand. So if you want to have direct impact or immediate impact on domestic demand, usually we implement or we use fiscal policies. Yeah, we use fiscal policies. While monetary policy usually have an indirect impact or has a lag impact on the domestic demands. So this is just an example that an example about policy that to bring about internal and external balance in this case. So in this graph, you see that this is the exchange rate, this is the fiscal ease. So we have 0.1 here. So if you are at here at 0.3, so for example, now we are at 0.2. So at 0.2, it means that we are having too low fiscal ease in this case. And then if you want to change to 0.1, for example, so at 0.2, it shows us that we have underemployment because we do not have the domestic spending as we want or as the economy want. So we have underemployment, and then we have excessive current account deficits in this case at 0.2, I mean. So the combination of devaluation and spending expansion indicated the figure moved the economies into internal and external balance at 0.1 here. So in this case, if you want to move from 1.1 to 0.2, it means the country need to have fiscal expansions and then devaluation their currency. That's why they can move, so that they can move from 0.2 to 0.1 here. So either you increase your fiscal, you implement expansionary fiscal policies. At the same time, you need to devalue your currency so that you can move from 0.2 to 0.1. If you just use, for example, if you just use a fiscal policy or expansionary fiscal policy, you can just move here. So you still have current account deficits. So together to have external balance, you need to also devalue your currencies. It means now you move up to 0.1 here. Your exchange rate is increasing so that you can move up from 0.2 to 0.1. So for example, now you are at 0.3 here. So at 0.3, meaning that you have expansionary fiscal policies, too much expansionary fiscal policies, and then you have large external deficit as well. So to move the economy from 0.3 to 0.1, what you need to do is you need to reduce your fiscal expenditures, or we can say we use contractionary fiscal policies in this case. So you can move from 0.3 to here, and then you devalue your currencies, you increase your exports, so you can move from here into here, or both from 0.3 to 0.1 here. So for example, now you are at 0.4 here. So at 0.4, you have also lowers fiscal expenditures. It means that if you want to move from 0.4 to 0.1, you need to have expansionary fiscal policy as well, and then you also need to devalue your currency so that you can move from 0.4 to 0.1 here. So it's just a similar way to the other points. So at some time, so in general, we use both. We do fiscal policies, and then we also have an adjustment on the exchange rate policy as well. During the Bretton Woods or during the fixed exchange rate periods, we have created the IMF. And the IMF is the organization of 189 countries. They're working now to foster global monetary cooperation. So this objective is now changed. If we compare to the IMF, the start of the IMF creations, they have only three. One is the management of exchange rate, the supporting the current account problem or issues, and then the reserve management. So now, currently, the IMF, they have several objectives, including global monetary cooperation, securing financial stability, facilitate trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and reduce poverty around the world. So as I mentioned, IMF created in 1945. And the primary purpose now is to ensure the stability of, so during that time, the creation of the IMF is actually to ensure the stability of the international monetary system. And then the fund mandate was updated that include all the macroeconomic and financial sector issues that bear on the global stabilities. So this is the updating objective of the IMF. Okay, so it's just a quick fact about the IMF. We already know it, the year that they created, the member, they have a 150 nationally represented by staff. They have 24 executive directors. They have a 1 trillion total amount of the IMF that able to lend to its member. So they have 36 lending arrangement. So the interest rate for the country is actually zero for low income country. And they have a technical advice or technical assistance to the country as well. So the IMF not only working to foster the financial stability or working to facilitate international trade or promote high employment, but they also work with the country on technical assistance, training, peer learning, for example. So there are three main roles of the IMF. The first one is economic surveillance. They oversee the international monetary system and monitors economic and financial policies. They have lending. They provide lending facilities for the country that experience, for member country that experiencing potential balance of payment problem, to help them rebuild their international reserve, stabilize their currencies in this case. And then they also having capacity development, training, technical assistance, for example. So this is the main role of the IMF. So in terms of surveillance, in order to maintain stability and prevent crisis in the international monetary system, the IMF, they keep monitoring member country policy as well as national, regional, and global economic and financial development. And the IMF provide advice to member countries and promote policies designed to foster economic stability, reduce vulnerability to economic and financial crisis, and raise living standards. So this is just a typical report that the IMF do. They have World Economic Outlook, which is the issue in January, July, and October, 3 times per year. They have, so this one is they do economic surveillance on the world economies. And then they have Global Financial Stability Report, which is looking at the world financial stabilities. They have Fiscal Monitor, which is also looking at the world economy as a whole. And then they break down into regional economic outlook. They have, besides looking at the economy as a whole, or besides looking at the world economy, they now narrow their work into regional economic outlook. And I take Asia and Pacific because Cambodia is in Asia and Pacific department. They have other regional economic outlook like Caribbean, for example, or Latin Americas. And then they have country surveillance that usually we call them Article 4. They come to the country every year. They conduct the surveillance. They're looking at the policy design. They're looking at the economic condition, financial system, physical policies to assist or to analyze what the country is doing in order to maintain the stability and prevent crisis. And we call them Article 4. So this is the country surveillance. They come every year, and this is an ongoing process that, as I mentioned, they come annually, regularly. They provide comprehensive consultation with the member country, with discussion in between they are needed. So during their Article 4 consultation, they're looking at the policies, fiscal policy, monetary policy, financial system, and they provide a recommendation, discussion in order to maintain the country economic stabilities. So this is what the IMF do. So during the fixed exchange rate, as we mentioned, the currency arrangement negotiated at Bretton Woods under the fixed exchange rate is actually monitored by the IMF in the era of reconstruction and growth in the world trade in the post-World War II. So, however, the widely diverging in monetary and fiscal policy, differential rate of inflation, and varied currency shock the result in the system actually. So the US dollar now become the main, during that time, become the main reserve currency held by all the central banks and resulting in a consistent growing BOP deficit, which require a heavy capital outflow of dollar to finance the deficit and meet the growing demand for dollar for investors and businesses. So eventually, because at first the US they want the capital outflow because that they are in excessive dollar held by the central bank. So when they want the capital, when they require heavy capital outflow, there is heavy overhang of dollar held by foreigners. The outflow meaning that they there are many foreigners that holding the dollars. So they resulted in a lack of confidence in the ability of the US to make a commitment to convert dollar into gold because everyone buying or holding too much dollars, buying a lot of US assets, financial assets, it's sometimes the investor doubt about the US ability to pay back the monies or to convert the dollar into gold under the fixed exchange rate in this case. So the lack of confidence forced the president in the US to suspend official purchase or sale of gold in 1971. And then because they suspend the purchase or sale of gold, they start to devalue the dollar, US dollars. And most currency now allowed to float to the level determined by the markets because they pursue that the fixed exchange rate doesn't work well in this case. In the floating era, if we go back to the graph here. So we move from the fixed exchange rate now to the floating era, to the floating exchange rate. Under the floating exchange rate, since the start of the adoption of the floating exchange rate, the exchange rate become much more volatile and less predictable because they are floating. And there are numerous and significant world currency events over the past several years. And the volatility of your US dollar exchange rate index, they illustrate here. So you can see this is the nominal exchange rate index for the US dollars. So at the start, you can see it's the Bretton Woods. You see we have a little fluctuations. We have the US dollar devalues, and then we have Jamaica arrangement. We have the fixed exchange rate system created, and then we have the dollar peak here. We have the EMS crisis, and then we have Asian financial crisis. So you can see along the ways, because the floating of the international monetary system are floating of the most of the world currency, make the exchange rate fluctuate, and we see many currency crisis event happen as well. Especially the most significant one is the Asian financial crisis in 1997, and there is a good presentation on Asian financial crisis. And there you will see more deeply about that. And we have the Brexit vote by the United Kingdom. So there's a lot of currencies event that happen along the histories. So emerging era is now, since the 1997 until now. So there's emerging market economy. They are multiplying in number and growing in complexities. So now we have an increasing emerging market economies, like China, for example, Korea, or BRICS, Brazil, Russia, China, India, for example. And this results in a growing number of emerging market currency as well. That's why I mentioned earlier before in the SDO, we have only four. We have US dollar, euro, Japanese yen, and pound sterling. But later on now, after 2015, the SDO have 5 currencies in the baskets, including the renminbi as well. So this one show about major regime categorize and translate in the global market. So the vertical dashed line is the crawling peg. It's a zone that some currency move into and out of depending on their relative currency stabilities. So this was the region taxonomy of exchange rate regime. Fixed peg or floating. We have fixed peg to something. A hard peg, extreme currency regime peg forms such as currency board and dollarizations. We have a soft peg, fixed exchange rate where authority maintain a set but variable band about some other currencies. And then we have a intermediate, or we call it crawling peg, that allows some floating at sometimes. And then we have floating. So floating is usually market driven, little intervention from the central banks. So in floating, mainly we see the managed float, which is the market forces the supply and the demand set of the exchange rate, but with occasional government intervention, or we say central bank interventions. And then we have free floating, totally a market force with no government intervention or central bank intervention. Central bank intervene just to minimize the fluctuations, but not to fix the exchange rate. So this is just the taxonomy of exchange rate regime that we could see in the emerging eras. So for now, this is the proportion of the IMF member country with floating regime. I mean, the percentage of the IMF membership by regime choice. So we see that in this case, there's a number of countries that move from fixed exchange rate to floating exchange rate. So although the contemporary international monetary system typically refer to a floating regime, it is clearly not the case for majority of the world nations. So let's looking at. So we have the blue one. The dark blue is the hard peg. We have the gray is the soft peg. We have light blue is the floating exchange rate regime. And then we have other regime. We call it residual, so we don't classify this one. So you can see from time to time, the floating regime has increased its choice, country increasing to adopt the floating exchange rate, but we also see a lot of countries still doing the soft peg, that allowing some fluctuation against a basket of currencies. And then we're looking at the exchange rate regime choice. So a nation choice a country decisions to which exchange rate regime to follow is actually, as I mentioned in the first lecture, reflect the domestic economy priorities, or the domestic country priority about all dimensions of the economies, including inflation, unemployment, interest rate level, trade balance, and economic growth. So this one is actually the precondition that the country need to looking at before they decide which regime they want to follow. So the choice between fixed and flexible exchange rate regime may change over time as the macroeconomic condition or the precondition, this precondition changes. And the country that they prefer fixed exchange rate regime, they may have the following reasons because they want to have a stability in international price. They want to have an inherent anti-inflationary nature of the fixed price in this case. But however, the fixed exchange rate regime may also have a problems. So the need for central bank to maintain a large quantity of hard currency and gold to defend the fixed rate. So because in the fixed exchange rate regime, that's the central bank need to do a lot of interventions. So it means that the central bank need to maintain a high level of reserve assets, including hard currency or gold, in order to intervention to defend, to maintain the fixed rate. And there are some times that the fixed rate can be maintained at a rate that are inconsistent with economic fundamental as well. So even though fixed exchange rate regime may provide some benefit, but they also have some problem as well. So if the ideal, so attribute to the ideal currency, so we can say, if the ideal currency exists, it would possess three attributes that refer to impossible trinities, or we say monetary policy trilemma, including exchange rate stabilities, full financial integration or capital control, or monetary independence. So the force of economic do not allow the simultaneous actual, so we cannot, impossible trinity, it means that they cannot achieve three objectives at the same time. They can choose two, but not three. That's why they call it impossible trinity. So the country must choose in which direction to move from the centers toward point A, B, or C. So their choice is a choice of what they want to pursue and what to give up. That the pyramid, the opposite point of the pyramid. So the marginal compromise is possible, but only marginal. So for example, at this point is the exchange rate stabilities, manage or peg exchange rate. This one is the monetary independent, it means independent monetary policies. This one is the full financial integration of free flow of capitals. So if the country, for example, they want to have exchange rate stabilities and monetary independence. So in this case, they have to give up free flow of capitals, or they have to give up full financial integration. So for example, China's and major industrial country under the Bretton Woods, they give up free flow of capitals because they want to have exchange rate stability and independent monetary policies. And then, for example, if you want to have exchange rate stabilities and free flow of capital, in this case, you have to give up your monetary independence. The example is the country in the European Union member state. So they give up their monetary policy, independent of their monetary policy. I mean, they need to follow the European central banks. They should, it's true that they have their own central bank in each country, but the central bank is not independent. It's not independent. They need to depend. They depend a policy on the European Central Bank. That's why if you want to have exchange rate stability, while you want to have free flow of capital, you need to abandon monetary independence. So mostly this is what happened in a region that adopt currency unions. And then if you want to have independent monetary policy and free flow of capital, you need to allow your exchange rate to flow. Example, US, Japan, Australia, for example, they give up a fixed exchange rate in this case. Any questions after this point? Silent mean no questions. So now what happened in the emerging market and regime choice? So in emerging market economies now they start to adopt from the fixed exchange rate. They move a little bit from fixed exchange rate and they adopt a currency board. They're not move immediately into the floating exchange rate. So a currency board exists when a country's central bank commits to back its monetary base, or we can say its money supply entirely with foreign reserve at all times. So this means that a unit of domestic currency cannot be introduced into the economy without an additional unit of foreign exchange reserve being obtained. So for example, in Argentina, they moved from managed exchange rate to a currency board. In 1991, then in 2002, the country ended currency board as a result of substantial economic and political turmoil in this case. So because they perceive that currency board is actually providing some issues in both economic and political, so they ended the currency board in 2002. Or some other country, they may adopt dollarization, which is the use of a foreign currency as official currency of the countries. So one attraction of dollarization is that they have a sound monetary and exchange rate policy, which no longer depends on the intelligence and discipline of the domestic policy makers. So if you are a dollarized economy, I mean you have really limited implementation or limited conduct of monetary policies. For example, Cambodia. We have limited room for conducting monetary policies because we do not know how much dollar there in the economy, and we do not print dollars. We have no right to print the dollars, only the US. So we have limited capacity to conduct or to implement monetary policies. So for example, in Panama, they have used dollar as official currencies, and then Ecuador replaced its domestic currency with the US dollar in 2000. So the country that adopt dollarization, they have a histories. For example, Cambodia, we have different histories. So dollar present in Cambodia since 1993 with the presence of UN, or we say UNTAC. And during that time, we have a hyperinflation, so we adopt US dollars. And then the Khmer will lose its value, so people want to store their asset, their wealth in the US dollars, and then the US dollar starts from there. So in every country, we have different story. I mean, every dollarization countries, we have different stories. And the policy of de-dollarization is a long-term objective. We could not do it immediately. If you immediately withdraw or ban the circulation of dollar, you will see a lot of issues happens, and maybe the two prices as well. So currency regime choice for emerging markets. There are some economies suggest that country will be forced to extreme when choosing currency regime, either a hard peg or free floating. So there are three common features that make emerging market economy hard to make a decisions. First one is they have a weak physical, financial, and monetary institutions. Number two is that they have a tendency for commerce to allow for currency substitutions and the denomination of liability in dollars. And probably the emerging market volatilities vulnerability to sudden stoppage of outside capital flow as well. So this common feature make the emerging market difficult to make a choice between currency regime. So for examples, this is the graph showing you about the emerging market currency choice. You have free floating regime or currency board or dollarization. So free current floating regime, we already know is that the currency value is free to float. The independent monetary policies, they have free movement of capitals, and the volatilities in the exchange rate may be more than what a small country with a small financial market can withstand. And for currency board or dollarization, it means that they are more or less a fixed exchange rate regime that require a change at the government set rate of exchange rate. And the currency board fix the value of local currency to another currency or basket of dollarization. Replace the currency with the US dollars. And so because we have no control over the money supply, the US dollar money supply, so we lose independent monetary policies. And political or policy to influence the monetary policy is eliminated or really limited. We also lose the seigniorage, which is the benefit of accruing to a government from ability to print its own money, because we have local currency and foreign currency, so it means you have to divide. I mean, the ability that you can earn or you can get uh, uh, a benefit from printing of money in already lost, because you have other currency in your economies. So that's what we call seigniorage. So how about in the futures? So all exchange rate regime, they must deal with the trade-off between the rule and discretions, between the corporation as well as between corporation and independent. So under the pre-World War One, the gold standard, they require the adherence to rule, free exchange rate, but they allow for independence. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement, you can see that they have a certain extent to the EMS. They also require adherence to rule in addition to corporations. So under the gold standard, we adhering to rule, but the system allow independence. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement, you adhering to rule at the same time, you also need cooperation as well. The present system is characterized by no rule and with different degree of cooperation. So many people, many economists believe that the new international monetary system succeed only if combined cooperation among nations with individual discretions to pursue domestic, social, economic, and financial goals. So it means that the new international monetary system should allow individual country to pursue its own domestic goal, its own economic and financial objective with various degree of cooperations among nations. That's why we have in the regions, in ASEAN, for example, we have create a safety net in the regions. So, but we have our own domestic economics and financial objective. We cannot follow others. We have our own goal, but what we need is a cooperation among the regions. So that's made the contribution to the international monetary system in the futures. So if you want to see what happened in the graph, you can see the appendix here. So I think that's all for the presentations for lecture 3, I think. So any questions?
Good evening, Doctor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I want to ask your opinion on how long will it take for Cambodia to become fully de-dollarized, and what are the challenges that we will face?
Mm. Good questions. I cannot say how long. It's a long term objective, and I cannot say when we can achieve. So in order for de-dollarization policies to succeed, actually the central bank or the embassy alone cannot work. I mean, the central bank work alone is not success. Because you see, there should be a cooperations between the NBC, the central bank, and other agencies. I think from time to time we have improved a lot cooperations. So we have a tax collection in Khmer Rio, and then we work with Ministry of Commerce to have a price tag in Khmer Rio. So this is just a good move. Even though some people still believe that it doesn't have a big impact, but we believe it's a good move, and it works. So it's a long-term objective, and I cannot comment when we can achieve this. And immediate withdrawal the US dollar will have big impact on the economy. So you can see US dollar actually benefit us in terms of foreign direct investments, trade. The investor do not need to face with exchange rate risk. They just bring in US dollars, they can do it. And the wealth, the domestic wealth mostly is stored in the US dollar. So if we immediately withdraw the US dollar, we may have problem in terms of domestic economy as well. So I cannot advise when we can achieve it, but again, it's a long-term objective. And we need cooperation in all of the sector in the economies, not only central bank alone cannot achieve this one, achieve de-dollarization policies. Good question. So any more questions? Am I answer your questions?
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? And in terms of de-dollarization, we actually introduce a lot of policy. How to say? It should be, yeah, a lot of policies and mechanism. So we have issue policy regulation that require banks and financial institutions to have at least 10% of my real loan in their portfolio. Then we have create various instruments, NCDs, RPCO, that's in areas. That is one policies, one part that increase the demand for Khmer as well in the economy. So we do have several policy in so far, and we still have consider many in the futures, including, for example, government bonds. So the MEF, they also come to the central bank for their suggestions, for our suggestions to which currencies they should issue. So we suggest or recommend them to issue the government bond in the Khmer Rouge. At one part, it can increase the capacity of the central bank in implementing the monetary policy, and at the same time, we want to increase the demand for Khmer Rouge in the local domestic economy. And then you can see that we gradually how to say, we gradually impact the US dollar circulation. If you have known that the $1 no the smaller denomination of US dollar, we actually if you go to Eon, they don't accept smaller note in the US dollar, like $1 or $5 something. If they change your money back, they will not change you in the smaller denomination of your US dollars. So this is a good start as well. It start from smaller denomination, I think. So it's a good move, actually. Any other questions? So silent, I'm not sure. Do you understand or you don't understand? I actually don't know. So we should, I want to have a 10-minute break. Then we will discuss about the assignment. Is that good for you?
Yeah, teacher.
Okay, so we come back at 7:35. So we will discuss. Then we can discuss a little bit about assignments. So thank you. I will upload the assignment here. Okay, everyone got the assignment? Everyone see the assignment? I posted.
Yes, teacher, I see it.
Others? I thought everyone see it. So just discuss a little bit on what about the assignments. So that we are on the right, we are on the same boat. So this assignment actually has two parts. So just read carefully. So the first one is for group presentation and topic. I already list down here. So we will start the group one on, I'm not sure, week 11 something. Just check with the, I think week 11. So we start with the debt crisis. So we have several encounter and debt crisis in the economy. Probably you can see what happened in Latin America and in Europe. So this is just the suggested content of your presentation. You may define for your own preference. So I think if we will start at week 11, the presentations. And then the next group 2 is Asian financial crisis. And then we have group 3 presenting the chapters in the books. The evolutionary form of international financial architectures, chapter 5 and chapter 6. So emerging market financial crisis and the secondary form of the international financial architectures, and then the challenge for developing country in a world of financial globalization. So why we present a chapter here? Because the crisis in Latin America and Europe and Asian financial crisis is actually in happen in emerging market economies. So that's why we put the chapters here. And we have group 4 on the global financial crisis. And group 5 on chapter 8 and chapter 9 on the role of international financial architecture in crisis prevention and crisis management, and the third reform of international financial architecture after the GFCs. And then the last group, group 6, is on global pandemic crisis or COVID-19 crisis. So the global pandemic crisis is a little bit distinct from other crises. But we also would like to see how is the pandemic crisis has impact on the economy or on the international financial system as well. So we have 6 groups here. So for group 1, group 2, and group 4 and group 6, mostly those present on the debt crisis, Asian financial crisis, GFC, and global pandemics crisis. We do not, I do not have, I do not restrict on any reading on the topic, but we just be cautious and use the more reliable sources. Group 3 and group 5, you see, you present 2 chapters, but you can look at the books. It's not as hard as you see. So you just follow the textbook and you add any other information. I recommend, and I want to see other information. You add other information that you find useful and relevant to your topics for group 3 and group 5. I happy to see data, presentation, graph, for example. And so you just send me the slide one day before your presentation. And so each member in the groups So each group is going to give a lecture to the class, and the presentation should convey that what you have learned by doing the project. And the presentation grade depend on your communication skill and your presentation skill. I know it's a bit hard to judge your presentation because we do it online. So we're looking at slides, we're looking at the verbal or non delivery, and the pace of your presentations, and whether you're able to handle the question from the audience. So all of these criteria that are you looking at. So any question about the presentations? Please ask. Um,
Teacher, a presentation is different from written assignment.
yes,
Okay. But
that's what
but in
I
this,
hmm?
but in the same group of
Yes,
people, right?
because I don't want to confuse yourself. I mean, to confuse all of you and also confusing me as well. So just do in the same group. Any questions? No questions. We go to the written assignment. So the same group, it's more like you're doing a small research for your written assignment, and you can choose any topic related to international finance or any topic that you can select a topic in trade as well if you want. I don't mind. But the topic should not be too broad. So for example, the behavior of a change, the topic on behavior of a change rate is a little bit broad, but you can narrow down, like you want to study the long run effectiveness of nominal exchange rate control, or you want to study the role of capital control in avoiding financial crisis for developing countries. So be more specific on the topic. Do not do it like too broad, as I put example here. But not too small. Because you can discuss with me about your topic if you like. I can like provide you some advice. So it's a good idea to start with the specific questions for your topic. It helps you to focus on your attention and efforts. So once you have a deep understanding of the issues, it's always easier and natural to answer the related questions. And this is just a recommend example of a topic that you can study. So, for example, the renminbi exchange rate misalignment estimations. You want to look at financial crisis and global imbalance. You want to looking at the development of currency union, for example, in Europe, or you want to see the relationship between the exchange rate regime and the current account and others. Or you can see the or you can study on the renminbi internationalization. What are the benefit and costs? So this topic is more like sorry. So this topic is more like qualitative, or you can select a country and examine its economic reason, economic and financial crisis, and you can explore why the crisis happened and what are the role of international finance play in the crisis and the resolutions. So it's just a recommended topic to you. You can have your own topic, come up with your own topic if you want, but remember, be more specific, and you should have several questions for your topic, and then you go out and try to find information, data to answer to your questions. And then this is the format of the paper. You can send me in the form of Microsoft Word or PDF. So no more than 5,000 words. I just put on the approximate word count here. So an introduction might be just 500 to 75, 750, and literature review also the same. So the important part is actually the discussion and analysis. So, but it should also not more than 2,500 words. And the conclusion is also around 500 and 750 words. So the font size should be in Times New Roman 11 for font size and 1.5 spacing. And you should also have a cover as well. Group number, topic, and the member's name. So I also put the suggested contents. You should include cover and content and at least 10 references as well in your papers. You must have statistic data that need to be labeled with a clear reference and source of the data. And for the reference style, I suggest to use APA or the style that you're comfortable with, but just let me know your style as well. Whether you want Chicago or you want Harvard style, it depends on you, but the suggested one should be APA. And so it's a group works. I'm sure every time when we work in a group work, there are always free riders. So I hope that each member should make a substantial contribution to the project. And I know that you will have a free rider or fractions. You have a group as you work in group or diversified group. So as you work in group, you should respect each other time constraint and schedules. Try your best to construct a positive and active team climate. So working in a group also show your leadership as well. Whether you be able to respect other, whether you be able to lead the group, or to create a active or positive in teamwork environments. And everyone should contribute to the group work, both presentation and the written assignment. So this is just a suggested content. So you should have a cover content, and then you have introduction, you have literature review, you have a discussion and analysis, which include methodologies, data, and results. And then you have conclusion and references. So the deadline submission will be on the 5th June 2022 at 11 p.m. It should be 10 or 11 week from now. I think it should be enough as well if you start early. So late submission will not be accepted and you are at the risk of getting zero for your assignment if you having late submissions. So I put it on the 5th June of 2022 because I want you to have time for your reviews, exam reviews. If I put it letters, you don't have time for your final exam session, final review for your exams. That's why I decided to put it on the 5th June 2022. Any questions for the written assignment or for the presentation?
How many minutes for the presentation?
Because you have a lot of people, I think, in each group, at least 5 or at least 6. I would suggest not more than 90 minutes for each group. Is it okay for everyone? If you have maybe some group will have more people. I will be flexible on that as well. Um, so that's why I asked you to send me your presentation one day earlier so that I can see your contents. I will be flexible on time, actually. Any other questions?
Yeah, go. You pick for us or you let customer to pick?
We will do it soon. We will do the group soon. So yeah, I will let the Microsoft team do it for me. More questions. So I think I will break you into groups so you can discuss more on the assignments. Probably at that time you will have questions. After you discussing, question will come up. So we have 6 topics, 6 group. I will have a okay. So we have 6 group. Yes. So I will put it. I will have we have a breakout room. So you will automatically assign to the group. After you already meet your group, please also okay, it's fine. So discuss in your group, come up with any question or doubt you still have before your presentation or about your written assignments.
Excuse me, like, so since you're gonna break us into specific group, so that's mean I don't have to send you the list of the member in the group, right?
That's why I'm thinking. It's fine. That's what I about to say. So yes, good. So probably the class monitor Kanita, I think. Maybe Kanita, right?
It's me and Daya, teacher.
Okay, so you can send me all the group name so that everyone can give you just one person and then you can send to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think everyone, so we have like, yeah, almost the same, almost equal number.
Hello, Cha. I didn't get to join any group.
Hello lecturer.
Hello, teacher.
Ê, trong tha group nó cho hở ai mến.
Yeah, they all joined the group. I think got like a sign small here, I guess.
Miệng mình group nó thôi tử.
Hello, Cha. I think the three of us haven't assigned to any group yet.
Hello teacher.
So I think everyone got the room. Why you can't go in? Danne, I think you're in group two. In group two. Can you join the group? Sorry, Danne.
Yes lecturer.
Danne, you're in group two. You cannot join.
It's just lecturer what group admin once again.
Who? Just give me your name.
Hello, teacher. I was disconnected a moment ago.
So which group you are in? Sorry, which group?
I'm not sure, teacher. A moment ago when you are saying, I was disconnected and I just come back.
Teacher, same for me, teacher. I did not know my.
Okay, let me check. So I'm signed you in group 2 and group 6.
Lecturer, could you please add me in group 2?
Đàn nế. Okay, yeah, được. Bật tay.
Yeah,
No.
So
Which
hi
group?
teacher.
Group 3?
I'm not sure teacher. I was disconnected a moment earlier because of my
Okay.
connection.
Let me do the name first then.
Yeah, teacher.
The name actually in green too. Should be in sun. Sorry.
Excuse me, like me and Nandin not yet form group.
So we have people coming. Check. Okay, so I'm coming back. Uh-huh. So any question in general? You can have a discussion later in the among the group, I think. So we have group one, 5 people, group two, five people, and group three, group four, group five, group six, 6 people. I will add other when they come later after your class monitor give me the name. Probably I add some other people in group one and group two. So any question in general? Question or doubt? I see some group they are very happy to after they get the assignment, so cannot wait to see your work. Any last comments or questions?
Hello, teacher. I have one question, teacher.
Yes.
Teacher, I am from 4 and my topic
Mm.
is financial crisis. And I want
Mm.
is it a theme or a topic, teacher?
What? Sorry again.
Like my group 4's topic is global financial crisis.
Mm.
And I would like to know, is it a topic or a theme?
What
Like,
do you mean by a topic of thing?
like if a topic, like we don't have to create another like topic question, but if it a theme, we need to find a topic of that theme.
You mean the presentations?
Yes, teacher, for presentation.
So it's about GFC. I specifically mentioned GFC in 2008 and 2009. So you can look at the content here and form. It's just a suggested one. You can refine your contents based on your discussions.
Oh, okay, teacher. So
Yes.
so that I can include all those contents in that topic, right? Teacher?
Yes. Or you can refine, make your you can make change, depend on your group discussion. And those who present crisis, I put country experience. So after you read or you search for the topic, you you will encounter some research that show about country experience. It's not I mean I'm not like limit to, for example, Asian financial crisis, limit to Thailand, Indonesia, and Korea. Probably you can talk about Malaysia's or other country, but Thailand, Indonesia, and Korea here is country that have the most impact actually. So that's why it should have more something. It should have more to say comparing to other country. And like for example, group one, the debt crisis. You can raise other country, not limit to Argentina, Mexico, or Greece, but you know that Greece is the most significant ones. So that's why I put Greece here, Mexico, and Argentina. And GFC also, you can raise about other country as well. But other country that you see significant or have the huge impact from the crisis. So I raised the US here because US, of course, is the originate. Probably you can raise about some country in Europe or some country in the region as well. It depends on your informations, what you have searched for. So that's why I say you can make change to the content here based on your discussions. But for group 3 and group 5, I'm sorry that you should make your own content. Depend on what you want to tell us about. So I'm sorry for that. But I think you learn a lot from the topic as well.
Yes, teacher, well
Yeah.
received.
Thank
Teacher,
you.
one more teacher. So
Yes.
written assignment, we need to submit the topic writer.
Yeah. So the topic, if you are fine with the topic, or you say I should consult with consult with lecturer, but it's okay. You can send me your topic and I can see whether the topic is too broad or too specific or something like that, just to give you some advice.
Okay, teacher. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think the class monitor can give me the name of each group, and the rest that absent today, that are absent today, so that I can assign them to the group manually.
Yes, I will send the list to you tomorrow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So any last comment or questions? Probably you will have along the way. I'm sure when you start working, you will have questions. So you can ask me next lectures, or when the start of each lectures, you can ask me about assignment. You can text me in the chat box. I'm not sure I can answer everyone because you have like more than 30, but yeah, I will try to answer as soon as possible. But probably you can ask me in the start of each lecture, each lectures, if you have. Okay, so I think everyone seems fine with the assignments, or you haven't had yet probably letters. You also can ask question about lectures today. So we will continue next week on topic on lecture 4. So you will have like almost 11 weeks for your assignment and presentation. I think it's good to start earlier to avoid any crisis happen on the deadline So, and if you work earlier, you can have time to make change if something seem not good, or you cannot find the data on the topic. You want to change the topic, you have to still have time. That's why we should work early. Okay, so if we have no more question, we can end the lecture here today. And again, we welcome questions regarding to the lecture or regarding to the assignment. And take care and have a nice dinner for everyone.
Goodbye, teacher.
Yeah, goodbye. See you next week.